First of all, I make a little thing about myself. I'm personally very interested in that because yesterday I received from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minui, to be his advisor on the name of the fight against anti-Semitism. So for me, it will be very important to hear what you have to say. Um, and also because you are among the first that being a professor, first professor of English and then the founder of the Institute for the Studies on Anti-Semitism, which is the most important thing that doesn't exist almost anywhere in the world. I mean, it's really quite a huge idea that should be spread all over the world. You are also the organizer of a group of professors, 60 academic names, very important names, that you were able to put together in the fight against anti-Semitism. Also, this is an incredible initiative nowadays that we should all try to push to follow. And having said that, I think that I've been reading you all along the time, always learning for the way you described anti-Semitism on a side like the most cruel, uh, the most cruel persecution of human beings that has happened all over history. That's the way I interpreted the things that you. And then you have changed your interpretation all along the time. Actually, I put down here two articles of yours. One is before, it's of August 23, so it's just before, it was on Sapir, and it was just before the 7th, the 7th of October, and the other one is afterwards. And there is a continuation between the two stages with a jump, with the jumps that you can already read in the title, because the title is Longing for Auschwitz, and this says it all. But please, Professor, just try to explain us what you mean and what you meant.
Sure. I don't know if my voice does my voice carry okay with
better with the microphone. The microphone is good.
Yeah, we'll first of all, I'm glad to be here. Thanks to Ahuva and to all of you for inviting me. I've been here before. I'm always happy to come back, and I'm always happy to be back in Israel. It's a tough time in Israel, and it's a tough time everywhere else right now, including in America. So I don't want to minimize that. I wish I brought good news with me. There may be a bit of good news, we'll see. But in addition to speaking to you, I also would welcome a chance to speak with you about the problems that we're facing, because they're serious and they're not about to go away anytime soon. On Yom HaShoah this year, President Biden gave a speech on anti-Semitism at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., and he decried what he called the ferocious surge of anti-Semitism in America and elsewhere, and he was not exaggerating, in fact, in using that phrase. The acceleration of Jew hatred was well underway prior to October 7th. It certainly picked up in frightening ways since October the 7th, and it continues today. What's behind all of that, of course, is the burden of our discussion today. Some of it I think we can figure out, some of it is hard, in fact, to figure out. But in my own understanding of what it is that is so adversarial, it's a new perception about the vulnerability of Jews to very serious attack. Until October 7th, Israel was not invulnerable, nor were we in America, but and I needn't say any more about October 7th among us. We all know what took place then, but it came as a great shock, and it seems to have incited a kind of bloodlust among many people. The willful spilling of Jewish blood, with everything that went with that, far from being condemned as outrageous and unacceptable, actually incited numbers of people who felt gleeful, who felt exhilarated, and were not ashamed to say as much in public, including people who are faculty members at American universities. That's new, or at least the degree to which any lack of restraint in expressing outright Jew hatred, that we've not faced before to the degree that we're facing now. So let me just give you some numbers and then I'll localize some of this to my own experience. Depending on how a Jew is defined and who counts Jews, Jews are round about 2% of the American population. Some people hike it up to 2.4%, but not more than that. Nonetheless, the latest FBI report on religious-based hate crimes in America show that 60% of religious-based hate, 60 percent of religious-based hate crimes in America are against Jews, who are about 2% of the population. The Anti-Defamation League, which monitors anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic incidents, came out with its last report in April, and it documented 8,873 acts of anti-Jewish aggression. That's the highest number ever recorded since 1979, when the ADL first began releasing these reports. One result of that is that almost without exception, virtually every synagogue, every Jewish school, every Jewish community center, every Jewish senior citizen home is now guarded. A couple of years ago, the bill for providing that kind of security for American Jewish institutions was $62 million. Shortly before coming on my trip to Israel, I spoke with a friend in the United Jewish Federations in New York who oversees all of this, and she said the present figure is somewhere close to $100 million.
In New York, I mean, in the state of New York.
No, throughout America.
Throughout.
Who pays for that?
Mostly we pay for it. Yeah, there are appeals to the central government in Washington, D.C. Why do we need that kind of protection? Given my own work, I'm a scholar of the Holocaust. For many, many years, I've gone back and forth to Europe, and I knew if I wanted to go to shul on Shabbat in Europe, in Germany, or in France, or someplace like that, there would always be security, and that was okay because it was needed. And it was always a relief to come back to America where there were no armed guards outside the synagogues. That's no longer the case.
Canada too.
Yeah, so we're not, I mean,
No
we're doing what we need to do, but the fact that we're doing it and need to do it is not a good sign. So who's behind all of this hostility? Lots of different people. It's multi-causal in origin. It doesn't reduce to any one cause or another cause. It's certainly represented on the left, it's represented on the right, and it's sometimes, in fact, the result of people doing terrible things who have no identifiable political persuasion at all. They just dislike Jews and don't feel any restraint about going after Jews. Segments of the American Muslim community, which is a growing community, for sure have been activated in this regard as well. Segments of America's large black population, similarly, not every black, not every Muslim, but sizable numbers of people in those communities, in Hispanic communities, even in Asian American communities these days, have turned hostile as well. Much of this was in place before October the 7th. It's just exploded since October the 7th. It shows up in all kinds of ways. It shows up in street demonstrations. It shows up on campuses, as you're all aware, I'm sure. It shows up in segments of the entertainment world, across the liberal media, certainly within social media as well. It shows up in pockets of political life. We're seeing things we've just never seen before, at least at this magnitude. And there are no signs yet of any real restraint among the actors doing this kind of stuff. To localize it, let me tell you just a little bit about the town where I make my own home. Gerald has been to Bloomington, Indiana. Bloomington is a wonderful campus town. We have a huge student population. Somewhere between 46 and 47,000 students go to the university. Like other campuses following October the 7th, we too were visited by these encampments and no end of protests and the like. Of the 46 to 47,000 students on campus, and I'm careful in giving you these figures, I honestly believe that no more than 300 have been activists in a very anti-Israel and in many ways anti-Semitic fashion as well. Now, the numbers are minuscule compared to the very large number on the student body, but at my university and other universities, the campus administrators have just collapsed in the face of all of this. They've not known how to deal with it. The results have been turmoil, even crisis on campus, and so it goes. Let me tell you a little bit more about Bloomington. I'm from the East Coast myself, but I've lived in the Midwest for many, many years, and it's been by and large a welcoming town for Jews and other people, but it's not been free of anti-Semitism. Some years ago, the only synagogue in town was set on fire by neo-Nazis. They were not from Bloomington, but they knew there was a synagogue there. They came into town and set it ablaze. We had to rebuild the synagogue, and we did. More recently, swastikas have been painted on walls around town, and white supremacists have joined forces with fervent anti-Israel propagandists in propagating hate speech in different forums. At Indiana University, where I teach, numerous anti-Semitic incidents have been documented this past year. No one has been brutally beaten, but students who come to town and put mezuzot on their doorposts have seen them removed. One of them was set on fire, things of that kind. There's been vandalism of Jewish student property as well. There have been threats of violence. Campus tour groups, um, parents who bring their kids to campus shopping for what university their kids might want to attend. These campus tour groups, time and again, have been harassed by anti-Israel and anti-Semitic groups of students who shouted at them Indiana University is enabling genocide in Gaza, things of this kind as well. Bomb threats have been made against Hillel and Chabad, and some Jewish faculty, myself included, receive hate mail. So long as the hate mail is only hate mail and remains verbal and doesn't turn physical, we live with it. We report it, but it's not easy. Now, day by day, life goes on in what looks like pretty normal fashion. But what I just detailed to you is also part of the scene that we live with. To flesh that out a little bit more, I want to tell you about a city council meeting that was held this spring in Bloomington. Some of you I know originate in America, although you make your home here. For those of you who don't, city council members are elected by the citizenry of the towns where they govern, basically to look after a number of municipal needs. So, for instance, if the school buses are not running on time and the kids are late, the city council is responsible for fixing that. If there are potholes in the street that make driving difficult, they're responsible for doing that. Things of that sort. No one runs for city council by declaring his or her foreign policy expertise or foreign policy opinions. But this spring, Bloomington was one of over 100 cities around America where the Bloomington city councils were taken over by people demanding what? A ceasefire in Gaza, condemnation of Israel in Gaza, not a word of mention of Hamas and the like. I and other colleagues got wind of this in advance, and we tried to convince the city council to put an end to it. It's all propagandistic. It's got no place in the life of the city. We did not succeed. We did succeed in getting the proposal watered down. Hamas, which was not mentioned in the first draft, was not only mentioned but highlighted in the second draft. We tried to convince people that whatever gets said in Bloomington, Indiana, is going to have no consequences whatsoever on peace in the Middle East, the ceasefire in Gaza. Forget about it. People wanted to do that. Now, Gerald Steinberg is here with his colleague Anne. They track where the money comes from. They track who's behind all of this. None of it is spontaneous. It's all organized. I was looking earlier at some of the booklets this institute, this center has been publishing, and I see certain things written by Dan Diker and others that speak to these issues, so I won't go on at any length about that. I will, however, just to detail some of what it is I'm telling you, give you some of what was said at the city council meetings. One speaker claimed the following: every aspect of the media is Jewish, every aspect of the government is Jewish, our wars are fought for Jewish interests. From another, Zionism is Judaism, Judaism is communism, it's a religion of sickness and evil. No one on the city council shut them down from making these comments, outrageous as they were. Others who spoke associated Jews with the Antichrist and the synagogue of Satan, quoted right out of parts of the New Testament, as you know. Still others spoke in grossly antagonistic terms about Israeli racism, apartheid, genocide, and other hatefully accusatory terms. And two people actually concluded their comments with Heil Hitler declarations. I'm not making this up. It's all on the record.
Welcome to Bloomington.
It's not unique to Bloomington, I'm sorry to say. Astonishingly, council members, there are 9 of them, uttered not a word of disapproval in hearing such outrageous remarks until the very end of the session, when shortly before midnight, it evidently dawned on them that they had provided an open forum for expressions of hatred in our city that may not be easy to contain. The Jewish community is small but not inconsequential. Many Jewish residents of Bloomington, myself among them, although I study anti-Semitism day and night, every day and night except Shabbos, were shocked by what we heard in these open forum sessions. And one wrote to me for the first time, I don't know if I can stay here. So a number of us protested to the mayor, protested to the city council members. The city council members then came out with a statement saying what? They condemn anti-Semitism, Islamophobia,
All forms of hatred.
and on and on and on and on. All of which tells me what? That they don't know a thing about anti-Semitism. It all gets run together with other kinds of social ills. These are people who say in good faith, as they understand it, that they stand for peace, justice, and human rights. There's no one around this table who doesn't stand for peace, justice, and human rights. But these virtues have all been weaponized and used time and time and time again against Jews and especially against Israel and the like. I want to tell you just some of what took place on my campus and other campuses during these so-called pro-Palestinian protests. The pro-Palestinian protests are not really pro-Palestinian at all, they're just anti-Israel protests. The people protesting know almost nothing about the nature of the conflict, but they command a lot of attention because they're so transgressive in what it is that they're saying, and there's a pleasure, evidently, in being transgressive. I tell my own students, as soon as they begin thinking in slogans, they stop thinking. But that's what's happening. We don't want no 2 states we won all of 48. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. There is only one solution, intifada, revolution. Zionism is a death cult, so Zionists leave. Settler, settler, go back home. Palestine is ours alone. O Al-Qassam, you make us proud. Kill another soldier now. Israel, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide. Now, university officials say, as one expects them to say, that free speech is the raison d'etre of a university, that open dialogue and discussion and debate is part of what makes a university a university. Technically, theoretically, they're right, but none of what I just read out to you has anything to do with debate, discussion, dialogue, or the like. And it's been happening on campuses throughout the country. Forgive me for the following, but you should know that it's also part of this sloganeering, fuck the Jews, we hate Zionists, by any means necessary, burn down Tel Aviv, kill the Jews, kill Israel. We're not talking about universities of a sort that many of you attended during your years in America, or the university where I continue to teach. Most of the 47,000 students at my university take no role whatsoever in this stuff. They don't join it, they don't protest it. They do what they came to campus to do. They study, they're looking to earn a degree, get a job afterwards. Otherwise, they love going to the football games, the basketball games, they like going to parties. They do what 19, 20, 21-year-olds do. But if you have 300 very well organized, very militant, very determined students who are shouting the kinds of slogans that I just put before you, backed, I'm ashamed to say, by a small number, but a vocal number of faculty members on campuses as well, we get into the kinds of problems that you're all aware of. The university president at Indiana didn't want Indiana to become Columbia University or UCLA. So she came down very hard on the protesters. She sent in campus police, state police. I was there and I saw what happened. There must have been 30 or more armed security guards. There were even, and this was a shock to see, there were snipers up on the roof of a building overlooking the encampment. I've been at the university forever. I never would have imagined I would see snipers up on the roof, but I stayed with it to see what would happen. And what happened is the following. The security personnel turned to the people who had put up these tents. I can't tell you exactly how many tents there were, but probably a few dozen. And they said, university policy does not permit these tents in this area. Please take them down. No. You have 15 minutes to take them down. No. You have 10 minutes to take them down. No. You have 5 minutes to take them down. We're not taking them down. Indiana University enables genocide, blah, 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 with all these crazy slogans that I just put before you. At which point the police began taking down the tents, and some of the people in the encampment began struggling and fighting with the police. You don't do that. You're going to lose if you do it. And they did lose, and they lost hard, because what I witnessed was tough. The police did what police do, and they really were very, very heavy-handed on their treatment of people, which is exactly what they wanted to happen. And then the reporters came and everything, and now the university president is being asked to resign, and she's not yet resigned, but
By whom? Who's
by
she?
the faculty. Yeah, because the faculty stands for something called free speech. I won't ask you
See, that's one
if
of
you
the
see
the context.
You mentioned 300 students out of 47,000.
Say it again.
You mentioned 300 students out of 47,000, but you didn't mention up until now faculty.
Yeah, a small number of faculty, but yes, some faculty involved. However, once the police came down on these protesters in a very physical way, throwing them to the ground, handcuffing them, taking them off to jail, it incentivized a very large faculty protest against the administrators of the university, who are now under fire and being told they have to resign. When I left for Israel the other day, they're still in office. I don't know what's
And
going to
why
happen.
did it incentivize the faculty?
Why?
They're good progressive liberals.
Generally, the faculty at my university, and again, we're talking about very large numbers of faculty. And there are divisions between faculty in the humanities, the social sciences, the hard sciences, the medical school, the law school. So I can't generalize about something called the faculty at large.
But there was not a tough reaction against the police by the media and by the public opinion, because usually this is what stops the police. Not this is what happens, that all the televisions and the radio and us start saying that the police beats. Here it happens all the time when the police intervenes, even when they close the highway. It's impossible, because immediately there is a tough reaction against the police. Didn't it happen there too? I mean, because
Sure.
that's the problem. I mean, the problem is not to call the police. This is something that everybody will do. But afterwards, then there is a terrible reaction against them, and they don't dare doing it anymore. That's why it grows and grows anyhow, doesn't it?
The encampment at my university is back up. I walked by the other day just to see what was going on. Nothing is going on. There are just a bunch of tents there. I didn't see anyone living in the tents as such, but none of us knows what to expect come fall. Right now, the campus is empty. We don't have an active summer school. So the town is quiet. It won't remain quiet once things start up again in the fall. But how to plan for that, what the university is doing to prepare for it, I don't know. The provost developed something called an anti-Semitism task force. I'm a member of it, so are other people members of it. We can advise, we can give counsel, we can clue them in to the fact that we're seeing only the local example of a national, even now international trend. In no time at all after October 7th, different groups, Students for Justice in Palestine, Faculty for Justice in Palestine, CARE, the Council for American Islamic Relations, were putting out what are called playbooks. And these playbooks circulated immediately all over the place, telling people exactly what to do, what language to use, what
Getting
not
slogans,
to do. And
They're getting
so,
graphics for posters. And
Yeah, I mean, some of the posters,
Yeah.
and you've seen pictures of them, are not hand drawn. They're very professionally organized. These tents don't cost $1 or $2. They're expensive. Where does that money come, etc.? So Gerald and Anne and others, I'm not
Ariella.
myself involved in researching this, but they are, and I read what they turn up. So we're up against it, frankly. Anti-Semitism comes in many, many forms. Far and away, the most verbal, the most visual, the most pervasive, the most aggressive, the most in-your-face form of anti-Semitism today is anti-Zionist anti-Semitism. We're no longer talking about political analysis, political critique. We're no longer talking about what can be said about this Israeli policy and that Israeli leader, although all of that precedes. We're really talking about raw hatred and an outpouring of raw hatred that shows no signs at the moment of pausing or stopping anytime soon. Now, there's lots more I could tell you, but that's enough for now,
Okay.
because I know you want not only to hear me, I want to hear
I
you,
want to hear them, yeah.
and
Okay,
I
so
give it to
Rafi.
Fiamma.
Please, so when you take the microphone, or you don't take it, you say your name and one or two words about yourself before you speak, okay?
I think you should give him the mic.
See, Rafi will be the first.
Okay.
Please use it because we are also connected.
The only one who can say that.
Because we are also connected. Rafi.
Your family.
My question is, what is the rate of the Jewish population in the city, on campus, faculty and students, and to what extent you can remark or cite the participation of the Jews in all three instances, for or against, because I hear that many Jews also join those programs.
Right. For a long, long time, it's not been possible to talk about anything called the Jewish community in America. It's a very divided community along many different lines, socially, economically, politically, religiously, you name it. We all wish that there were a more unified community, but there's not. Overwhelmingly, at least so far, most American Jews still identify with Zionism and with the State of Israel, but within the community, there are certainly groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, If Not Now, and other groups that are actively involved and in cohort with especially illiberal elements of the left, and they do participate in some of what you're saying. Now, at my university, I mean, if you were to look at Columbia University or Harvard University, the Jewish presence as such would be higher than it is at my university. Most of my colleagues don't participate in the anti-Israel stuff, although a few do. Right after October 7th, I and some others established a group. We call ourselves Faculty and Staff for Israel, with a heavy emphasis on the preposition for Israel. There are a few other groups now of that kind. University of Illinois with Carrie Nelson has such a group, and a few other. Now we have about 65 faculty, and we act as a support group for students, a support group for one another, and we make sure that university administration will get a point of view that will counter the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic stuff. So are there Jews involved on the other side? Shamefully, yes, there are.
Where are these 65 faculties? Where are they located?
In what departments you mean?
No, yes, I mean all over the
Yeah,
university.
they're in the various colleges of the university, including the medical school. They include many of the most distinguished faculty. So the university
Very
pays
interesting.
attention to certain people who are really exalted figures. So we're not without some clout.
Okay.
You know,
Please, allora, so you can pass the microphone, please say your name, please, and
Ann Hertzberg from NGO Monitor. I think I know most people here. One thing, Alvin, thanks so much for your presentation. I don't know if you've seen it on campus, but what we've been documenting is the influence of Iran and terror-linked actors in this whole, these happenings that are happening, you know, all the protests. I think the way I've been looking at it, I think we need to conceive of this is the information war that's going along with the military campaign, and it can't be separated from that.
yes.
Because the signage, all of the protest materials, these booklets, they were ready to go October 7th.
Yes.
That's when we started seeing them employed. And so I think we have to, when we look into how we're going to be combating this, we really have to start thinking of it in those terms. We need law enforcement involved, counterterrorism officials involved. I just think we need to completely reconceptualize how we're viewing these events that have been going on.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I agree.
but he asked before.
Sorry, Joel.
So very dirty.
Hi, Professor Rosenfeld, thank you very much for your presentation.
Please, your name.
My name is Artie Geltman. I live in Efrat and I'm a Gabbai.
No one is
I'll
talking.
try to do this very quickly.
That's a professional.
Is it your sense that non-identifiably Jews throughout the United States, others non-Orthodox, they don't wear kippot or they don't have beards, do they feel a sense of threat day in and day out, even though they may not even be affiliated with any Jewish institutions? Number two, what about law enforcement outside campuses? Are they doing, the sense I get by reading and following is that they're just turning the other way. They're not, you know, God forbid, like in the 1930s in Germany, they were part of the problem. Here it seems they're saying, listen, we just can't help you, we're sorry. And they walk away, and it's good for you, it would be good for you if you left also. That's the sense I get, that law enforcement in America is not doing its job. And three, again, just in your opinion, do you think that finally the anti-Semitism in America is out of the bottle and cannot put, the genie is out of the bottle and cannot be put back in?
Right. So in talking about American Jews, we're talking about millions of people.
Your
So,
sense.
yeah, and it's hard to generalize about numbers that large. However, I would say just about every Jew in America today is feeling a sense of unease that has not been felt before, and for good reason. Now, how they then respond out of this unease will vary a lot, for sure. The number one priority, as I already told you, is physical security. America was considered, excuse me, maybe in some ways is still considered exceptional. American exceptionalism would provide a home for Jews of a sort that was not available in Europe. I myself am a first generation American Jew. My parents were born in Podolia, a part of what had been Tsarist Russia, today is part of Western Ukraine and the like. And my parents came to America for two reasons. Too much anti-Semitism back in the old country. America would be different and would give us an opportunity to thrive free of that. Did they make a mistake? No, they didn't make a mistake. My family history, like that of a great many others of my generation, is typical. So there were lots and lots of immigrant Jews who came with no English, no special skills, not much money, whose children and grandchildren became educated, integrated, still very Jewish, no question about it. Not each and every one of us, but still very Jewish. My matana to Israel lives in Tel Aviv. My daughter made Aliyah about 8 years ago. I arrived on Thursday. I had dinner with my youngest grandson, Adin. He's a combat medic in the IDF, stationed in the south, seeing and doing things that no 19-year-old should have to see and do. And in that respect, he's like countless numbers of other young Israelis. So in our case, the Jewish identity is firm and the commitment is real and ongoing. In the case of others, much less so. 70% of American Jews who are non-Orthodox intermarry. The children of those intermarried couples sometimes are raised Jewishly, often not. So America, the promised land, in some ways fulfilled the promise. They allowed us to integrate, to thrive, but today it's coming back with thought. America is in the grip right now of what's called identity politics. And certain groups are favored, other groups are not favored. If we were to look at the American Jewish success story, how many doctors in America are Jewish? How many lawyers are Jewish? How many heads of corporations are Jewish? It would go well beyond the 2%. For that reason, we never like to count numbers. It goes against us. Personally, I'm proud of the fact that American Jews have succeeded to this degree. Our very success is now being held against us. Now, does that get down to the police level? I don't know. I really don't know.
Joel,
Thank you very much.
maybe you take some questions together because, okay,
Whatever you want.
Cyril, take some questions.
Well, I'll ask a short question. Also, with the demonstrations that we see, I observe you, there's a tremendous representation of young women. They seem to make up the most vocal element of the useful idiots. They are angry and incensed, and sometimes it involves anti-Semitism, but we also saw it in the demonstration of the people who dogged the Prime Minister on his visit to the United States, and made sure that it acted as a stumbling block for whatever diplomatic effort he wanted to have. And they, by their function and the way that they acted, these were Jews who were behaving like anti-Semites. And if they behave like anti-Semites, they are. But, so the question is, why is this anger? And the other thing is the litany of drums and chants that goes with it. It's totalitarian. You can answer this at your convenience, but this is a question I think we have to ask. Before, let's say, the French Revolution, there was the unhappiness of the intellectuals, the young intellectuals who couldn't find jobs and so on, and they didn't like the regime as it existed. So I'm interested in the causes. The basic question, what is the cause of all these unhappy women, Jewish and otherwise?
Santi, give me, because I want to ask you together the question of Harold Road that is watching us on screen. And he's asking Harold Road, Dr. Harold Road. He's also a very good expert in Middle East. But he asks here not something about Middle East, but about the American Jews, as it looks like having become the most important subject over here. But I would like to remind you that there is a lot of anti-Semitism not only there but also in Europe.
Yes.
It became number one problem even there, and for many historical and present reasons. Now Harold asked if you think that today the situation is comparable to the situation of the German Jews in the 30s. That this is his question. So you can put it together with the question about women.
Fiamma, after you answer, I'd like to talk about that for a minute too.
Same with me. Okay, we will see. Better.
We let Alvin. I want to hear Alvin's answer.
So we let him answer. And
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
unless you want to.
Well, this is sort of related in a way. Rivka Fishman, emerita, I guess I'm a grandmother now, I don't know, emerita from School for Overseas Students, Rothberg International, where I taught Jewish history for about 40 years. And my question is, where are the Jewish studies people now? There's been a lot of criticism of them. Some of it justified. Some of it I've seen over the years, having had many contact with students who used to come here. COVID killed whatever was left of the Rothberg International School, and I had a lot of contact with American students, and there is a feeling among certain professors that the Jewish studies professors and programs are, as you said, either apathetic or non-supportive, and is someone monitoring them and what is going on there? Because there is a feeling that they've abandoned the cause.
You can remember all these questions.
It was only 3 questions, not such a big.
Right. I don't have an answer for the women's question. I really don't. I don't study it myself, and I've not read any research that talks about the role of women in particular. If I look across my campus, have there been women involved? Sure, but lots of men involved as well. So I just don't know how to speak to that issue. Are we looking today at Germany in the 1930s? Heaven help us if so. We do know that what took place at German universities early on in the Hitler period was a forerunner to what was to come later. And looking at American universities now, there are people beginning to ask that question. Nazism, of course, brought state-sponsored anti-Semitism into the public arena as government policy. And we're not seeing anything like that at this point. And we want to make sure that it doesn't reach anything resembling that. What we are seeing, though, are developments within
well, in Spain it's sponsored, also in France, and also in many other countries it's sponsored, because the moment when they go and say, I want to join the genocide thing in the Hague, then they sponsor it in a way, right? It didn't happen in the United States.
No, we're not seeing that in America.
Not in the United States, but in Spain
see
it did.
In America as well, because at that point one is talking not only about a threat to Jews, but to civil society itself and the foundations of American democracy. So no, we're not seeing that now, but we have to make sure nothing like that lies ahead. Were there any other questions?
Yes, Gerald.
I just want to expand.
Jewish studies, Professor Rosenfeld, Jewish studies.
Jewish studies. So Jewish studies exists in a number of universities. It's a mixed bag. And there are different attitudes among Jewish studies professors about everything is Israel related. And there are Jewish studies professors who would not be comfortable sitting around this room for sure. I just learned to my shock today that the University of Minnesota, which is a major public university in America, and has a well-established and relatively well-regarded Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies, just appointed as its new director a former Israeli scholar, Raz Siegel, his name is, who is very bad news.
Yeah.
Raz Siegel is a good scholar of the Holocaust in Hungary, but he wasted no time after October 7th coming out with written statements denouncing the state of Israel for genocide. The
And
fact
they were the primary evidence used at his in the ICJ case because it's Jewish cover for
yes, yes, and some of your exports to America are welcome. Certain people I wish would stay here, and you can do with them what you do with them. But
Wait,
Maya Arad, Maya Arad, who's an Israeli novelist living in the States, just wrote a collection called The Hebrew Teacher, and she uses that exact case of a former Israeli who's very anti-Israel becoming the head of the Jewish Studies department at the university where she teaches.
some years ago, the scholar Elchanan Yakira, whom some of you know, published a very important book on anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and he took a hard look at Israeli anti-Israel people. And they're a problem for us
Ilan
because
Papa, there's
And
this
there is something about
one of the family that held the hostages in Gaza. There's a journalist, in quotes, and that journalist, in addition to an Al Jazeera connection, is connected to Palestine Chronicle. The Palestine Chronicle board includes Ilan Papa, Richard Falk, there are others too.
And the Jesuits called them talking dogs.
That's right, talking about.
Okay, I was going to say something
Okay,
positive.
now it's Gerald asking his question.
I was going to suggest something positive on this. I spent a few days in Amsterdam with a meeting of the heads of European Jewish communities on anti-Semitism,
just
which
now,
was
just now, right?
Just now, yes. It was more depressing than yours because it was from 20 different countries. But I observed there, and I talked about that a little bit. What I saw was a positive development, which is different than the 1930s. In one of the panels, there were a group of students from different places. And they were mobilized. They talked about mobilizing other students, primarily Jewish, but not only, and getting help from the communities. And we see that a lot. I see it a lot. I think we see it in different places. We get a lot of requests, a lot of interest, interns, other things. I think now there is a big pushback. And you watch Harvard and see this guy, Shabbos, what's his last name? There are a number of those that are out there. There are a lot.
Yes.
There are at every campus, at Columbia, at Harvard, other universities as well. And I see more faculty members, some of them Israelis, Davidi and others. So, and I pointed that out, and I don't want to overdo it. I tend to be an optimistic person, so maybe there's a sense of wish fulfillment there. But I'm wondering whether you see this also from your vantage points.
Yes.
And maybe we can develop that further, provide platforms and support for that.
I do see it, and it's a good development. It's all, however, an initiative on the part of individuals. There are no sponsoring groups behind it. Some of us are beginning to talk about the need for a national group of scholars. And by the way, the group that I established at my university, we're now about 65 and will grow, is not restricted to Jews. We have some excellent colleagues who are Christian, and we have two Muslims as well. in our group, one of them originally from Iran, one of them originally from Turkey. And the more of that, the better. I think it would be helpful. Well, there are individual groups. You're all probably familiar with a group called AEN, the Academic Engagement Network, which does good work on campuses. The Brandeis Center in Washington, D.C., not Brandeis University, but the Brandeis Center, Ken Marcus is doing good work. There is a wonderful woman in California named Tammy Rossman Benjamin, who has a group called Amcha, which does good work.
And we all meet together at your center.
Well, yeah.
Right.
So the more of that, the better. It's not hopeless, but it's certainly uphill. I want to quote, however, one thing that is worth reminding you of. The language that's just pouring out, of course, is mindless. And you mentioned earlier the drums begin beating. The drums are always beating. As soon as the drums beat and the tents go up, the mind shuts down. And that's intentional. Yeah, keep people from thinking. And then just ensnare them in slogans and the like. And we're seeing a lot of that. It's not new. This is, by my count, correct me if I'm wrong, the fifth war between Israel and Hamas. And I went back to the 2014 war, 10 years ago, because what I'm hearing today echoes much of what was being shouted out, sloganeered out at the time. And I'll quote you just a couple of sentences from a comparative literature professor at Columbia University. His name is Hamid Dabashi. He holds an endowed chair, and he referred to Gaza, we're going back 10 years, I quote him, as a concentration camp. And then he said the following: after Gaza, not a single living Israeli can utter the word Auschwitz without it sounding like Gaza. Auschwitz, as a historical fact, is now archival. Auschwitz, as a metaphor, is now Palestinian. From now on, any time, any Israeli, any time, any Jew, anywhere in the world utters the word, hold on, Auschwitz, or the word Holocaust, the world will hear Gaza. Now, do I think that that's historically sound? Not in the least. Do I think it's rhetorically compelling? And do I think that a lie repeated often enough and loudly enough will begin to take hold? And do I think that in an age of Holocaust minimization, Holocaust relativization, Holocaust distortion, something of this sort can come to the fore and begin to even prevail in the minds and slogans of large numbers of people? Yes.
But that's just, this entire war is going to be, right now, it's all going to be about emotion. The war in America, I'm saying, the social war in Europe, the societal issues, and I think that's our problem from the Jewish perspective, is we approach it from a more intellectual place, and we talk about academics.
Yes.
But and academics should lead it. But when you talk about these individuals on campus that are fighting back, what they need is they need the leadership on the emotional. The Palestinians are winning on emotion
Yes.
and rhetoric. And where's our side of that? And that's where we need, I think, the social workers, all those Jewish social workers that understand emotion and understand people. I think we need the intellectual side, and we need to battle that intellectually and in the courts and in the legislatures. But on campuses, it's social.
We're all missing something. This didn't happen overnight.
Listen,
This is where has all the Jewish organizations that have taken millions and millions and millions of dollars to fight anti-Semitism
Holocaust
for the
museums.
last 20 years, how did they let this happen? And if this happened, what does that say about their efforts?
But because when we have trips like Birthright and you've got thousands and thousands of kids, right now no one's taking them and saying, let's go and organize all those kids.
How did that work?
No, I think
Please
I think
don't
it's great.
speak all
Fiamma,
together. And
can-
now it's the professor has to speak. I also have a question, by the way, but I will leave it as
You're right to draw attention to the emotional aspect. Whatever anti-Semitism is, and there are big debates, as you know, about how one defines anti-Semitism, it's a passion before it's an idea. And right now, it's a very, very strong passion, a very negative and destructive passion. And there it is, unrestrained, doing a lot of damage.
I would add that if a lot of money was poured and then we don't see the results in the fight against anti-Semitism, much more money was put in the fight against the Jews in the universities all over the world. That's the money that they got from Qatar, that they got from Iran. That's plenty of money. And I think nowadays that there is a very important fight, not only on the side of ideas, but also on the side of money, cutting the money to this university, cutting their money, and law, because we must criminalize anti-Semitism. This is also another point when you spoke about, so criminalization and money, together with ideas, we have three fronts where we have to fight, and it's not easy.
I just have one point, and I wanted to thank you for mentioning that Columbia professor. In the planning meetings for Durban, they spoke of saying not the Holocaust, but holocausts. And that happened, that's right. And that was policy from the real source, Iranian anti-Semitism, from the beginning. And what you're describing is a continuation of a well-known theme.
Yup.
Somebody else?
By the way, I was a faculty, I was living in Israel. I was a faculty for 11 years.
Let's hear you better with this.
I was visiting faculty at Columbia for 11 years in the medical school, so I was hanging out on the campus a lot. Hamid was a regular speaker every year at Israel Apartheid Week. And the students, one year, managed to get him afterwards and asked him to have a discussion with an Israeli professor who was me. So we had it scheduled. It was at a student hall in Barnard, and it was put all over the place. And we show up, and 5 minutes before the session, he canceled. Didn't show up.
Because he would be
Because I think
with an Israeli.
tell me if this is your experience. They don't want to engage in any discussion. They demonize. I mean, go back to the Sharansky word. They demonize and all of these. They never engage. And I've been in different campuses in the States. I remember sitting just as an observer in the audience when they had discussions like this. They just want to accuse and demonize, but when they're faced with someone who comes up with something of any sort of intellectual logic from another academic point of view, they just cut them down. They don't want to listen. And I go back, back to my question on all this fighting anti-Semitism on campus. So many campus organizations for years, and I saw this when I was on the campuses. They never really engaged faculty. All their efforts were always at students and falafel parties and stuff like that. But there was never Halloween, what they called Halloween. There never was any effort really to expose these people for what they are. Now, the students get this from somewhere. Now, the 47,000 students that you mentioned are not really active at Indiana. I don't doubt that. But if we take a look at the prevailing winds of opinion among the young people of the United States, they're not active, but this is what they believe. They may not be anti-Semites, but they believe that we're doing all these horrible things and we do these things. And I would probably think that you probably feel that at Indiana there's a good number of students that believe that, even though they're not active. So all this stuff comes from people that taught them to be this way. And I'm glad to hear what you were talking about as far as the faculty starting to engage in getting more faculty involvement. And I'm wondering if some of all this money that was poured into student activities of fighting anti-Semitism on campus, if there's not time to think about really exposing the faculty hard and really to have an effort over there.
And an effort in that direction is much needed. What else? I mean, universities are now under more intellectual scrutiny than they have been in my lifetime. And for good reason, because things happening on American campuses shouldn't be happening, and it doesn't come out of nowhere. What's been going on for a long, long time, at least among some departments and the like, it's ideologically overdetermined. And it's ideologically really figured in such a way as to be not only anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, but anti-American, anti-capitalist, anti-West. And
it's a terroristic fight.
Part of the wokeism.
yeah.
Do you see on your college campus, do you see from the women's department, the women's studies department, that they have a leadership role? Because I think that ties back to this. At your university, are they having a leading voice?
Not today. No, elsewhere yes, but not where we.
We're losing it.
With all the rapes and the violence that we had here, the question of women really became very, very symbolic. You know, the fact that women became a leading force in anti-Semitism, it's something that nobody could have expected after all these years of feminist fight, right?
No, but I think it ties in. It's part of, I mean, in the women's departments on university campuses, they're usually the most liberal of the liberal.
Okay, and they were the leading force against the Jewish state at the moment where they did not recognize that our women had been raped. That was really amazing from the side.
And that's after saying believe all women.
So,
Okay, so do you want to make a conclusion, please?
Do I want to make a conclusion?
Yes.
Jews are supposed to end on a happy note. My happy note is I'm in Israel. And I'll go home and say as much. Somebody asked me yesterday how many times have I been to Israel, and I don't know, but at least 25. So, as I recently wrote, and I'm not shy to write what I believe and say what I believe, there will be no Jewish future worthy the name without the state of Israel. Of that I'm absolutely sure. So we have to do everything that we can possibly do to be supportive of the state of Israel. And when I'm asked, as I sometimes am asked, don't I think it's terrible that so many innocent people have been killed in Gaza? And my answer is yes, of course it's terrible. War is terrible. And best not to start a war. Because if you do, the result is going to be catastrophic for a lot of people. That doesn't make me popular in many circles, but I'm convinced that's the case. So my visit to Israel has just begun. I flew here on El Al, which was great. My last flight was canceled. As I mentioned, I had dinner during my first night with my grandson, and I'm both proud of him and concerned for his well-being. And when he asked me, what in the world is going on among people his generation in American campuses, I look at him and I say, you know what, stay in Israel. With all the problems here, you'll be better off here. At least it's not nonsense.
Are you doing anything to preempt or pre-plan?
Am I going to do what?
For when you go back to university? You know, are you going to wait to see what the students do and then sort of be reactive from the Jewish
I'll
faculty?
meet with my own group. I'll meet with the president of the university. I'll meet with the provost and begin to do what we need to do. Just what that'll be depends on what happens. When I go to Tel Aviv, I'll be speaking on the subject of a very, very serious think tank called INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies.
Insecurity.
Well, my exposure to them has been, anyway, I'll do what I can do. And I know you'll all continue to do what you're doing. So thanks for having me come.
Thanks for coming.